Hello, Internet. I must tell you, I'm excited here because I got two martial arts experts. One will introduce the other, and that one we know well, Paul Danos from Bloemfontein, South Africa. Now, why I'm saying this is because people in Bloemfontein, South Africa normally speak one language, and that's Afrikaans and nothing else. But this Paul fellow, he's been on before, ex-policeman, ex-army, South African, now living in Florida. He speaks many languages. And that makes him quite strange. So anyway, Paul, who do you have here? What introduce me to this fellow you brought to us, please.
Yes, of course, very grateful to you for having this legacy podcast. And the gentleman we're going to have today is a very interesting person. I met him like 30 years ago in Las Vegas. We have a mutual friend together, actually, who passed away about more than a year and a half ago. He was the former USA karate coach, Hanshi Chuck Merriman. And I was with him in a tournament in Las Vegas. And while we were at the venue, Hanshi George Alexander was there in the corner selling his DVDs. He's promoting his DVDs. And he said to me, he said, you want to meet a top martial artist and a guy who's the real deal and a former ex-Marine Recon. He says, come with me. He took me there. Sure enough, I met Hanshi George Alexander. I guess at the time he must have been in his 40s, mid-40s, strong, everything. And I ended up buying his DVDs. And him and I kept in contact. We got into contact actually recently. And I reminded him of our meeting, and I'm so happy that you're going to have him on this podcast because I want the viewers in South Africa and the whole world to hear his story from being a Vietnam vet, especially the Marine Recon, going behind enemy territory, and then also his martial arts career. He's martial arts. He's top of the line. He's what they know. He's known as a Hanshi, and Hanshi means a master, and he's master in the true sense of the word. Today, there's so many people with titles. I'm telling you, a lot of Mickey Mouse people who don't deserve that title, but he's the real deal. And he's the kind of guy, if I was to walk down a dark alley, I'd want him to be next to me. I consider him the most dangerous man in the world. That's it.
Well, let us meet this fellow then. And sir, may I say to you, very welcome here. Thank you for your time. We really appreciate you. We really like to hear more about other foreign militaries. Besides our own. So if there's any of our foreigners listening here, if you think you have a story, and even if you don't have a story, please come and talk to us. Soldiers across the world, we're basically the same people, we're not that different from each other. So let us introduce George Alexander. Sir, welcome here, and tell me, how did you end up in Vietnam? Tell me about your childhood, what happened?
Yeah, so thank you very much for having me, and interested in my story, I guess. But I've got a lot of stories. But as Paul was saying, I've been a martial artist since I was a kid. Actually, since I was about 10 or 12 years old. My father, who was in World War II, he's in the U.S. Army Air Corps. He started teaching me jiu-jitsu when I was 10 or 12. I don't even remember how old I was, but anyway, that was the start of all that. And then as far as the military is concerned, I was kind of a wild kid, maybe. I don't know. And they said, listen, I wanted to leave the nest, so to speak. And so I was 17 and I just couldn't stand it anymore. I wanted to see the world. And they said, well, we have a place for you. And you're gonna join the Marines. Actually, I think it was my idea. I researched all of them, and I said, well, will the Marines make me tough? And I probably shouldn't say this, but I had an abusive older brother, okay, and he was actually a cross between Arnold Schwarzenegger and Charles Manson. So he was much older than me. So it was someone to fear. So this may have been part of my initial motivation. But anyway, I joined the Marines at 17, and that was another rude awakening. Okay. That boot camp thing was just unbelievable. So, and back in those days, the recruiter just wanted bodies. They just signed you up and that was it. Today, it's like, wow, you need to do some preparation before you go off. And so with the Marines, it was like, well, you better be able to run 3 miles. You better be able in a certain amount of time. You need to do so many push-ups, so many sit-ups, and so many pull-ups. Make sure you can do that before you get to boot camp, and you'll have a much easier time of it. Well, I wish there was somebody that said that to me, but there wasn't. So I paid dearly. And so anyway, I'll spare you the details on that, but I paid dearly for that. But I survived. And what kind of one of the things that happened, I was in an infantry unit. So I was a grunt or a ground pounder. And so I did that. I was assigned to an infantry unit at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Don't drink the water. Okay, whatever. Anyway, that was kind of good. And then after, I was actually in that unit for a couple of years and did some traveling, went on a med cruise, went all over the place. And so somebody came over to the company area one day and said, "Who wants to run, jump, and swim?" And I went, "My God, who the hell is that?" And they said, "That's this guy from Force Recon. They're recruiting people." I went, what is that? So, "Well, that's the really crazy guys." I went, "Well, hell, I want that. Sign me up." So I went over there and I took the PT test, but I trained for that PT test for 3 months. I ran 10 miles a day, and I was just constantly doing push-ups and sit-ups and pull-ups. So I trained for 3 months for that. 12 people took the test, and 2 passed. And so the idea is to wash people out. It's designed to make you fail and to make you quit. And then whoever decides not to give up, no matter what the cost or what the pain, those are the ones that they're looking for. You don't really have to be crazy, but it helps. Anyway, so I did that, and the actual PT test in terms of time was not that long. It was a half hour or 45 minutes of PT. That's, just doing exercises, sit-ups, push-ups, and pull-ups. And it was done like circuit training, where you go from one event to the next. The only thing that made it a little bit more difficult was you had to scream at the top of your lungs while you were doing every exercise to failure. You can only do so many push-ups, and then you're done. You can't do anymore. Sit-ups, same way. You're done. You can't do anymore. Pull-ups, you can only do so many. You're done. Once you go to failure, you go to the next event, all right? And you do that again. And keep in mind, you are screaming your brains out the entire time. Well, you can't do that for more than a half hour, 45 minutes. It's insane. So then finished that. And then they said, "Okay, go get a drink of water." And this was in the summer, July or August, and it was really hot. Got a drink of water out of a faucet. And then they said, "Okay, fall out on the road. We're going to run." I'm like, "Okay, I can do that. Hell, I can run 10 miles a day. I can do that." So we get out there, and he goes, "You see those trees down there?" And I look, and the trees are about this big. And I went, "Yeah, okay." So we run all the way down there. We get there, and he goes, "All right." And I go, "Whew, whew. Wow, yeah, I made that. I passed that." And he goes, "Okay, now we got to run back." And I'm like, "What? Run back? I don't have any more energy. I can't run back." Well, sure enough, had to run back. And so we ran back however many miles it was, and finished that. So it was a grueling ordeal. And so that is to separate the weak, okay? And so they were successful. But I always, I did write a book. I don't have a copy of that. It's called Seeking the Way. It's an autobiography, actually. I should have brought a copy of that. But anyway, so I mentioned that test in there, and how that all went. And then, of course, that was in the morning. And in the afternoon, you have a swim test. Okay, so that's kind of kind of grueling too. So anyway, that got me out of the regular infantry, and not that I didn't like the infantry. That man, I traveled all over the world doing that before I ever did any force recon stuff. And so anyway, I did that. And then, so I went to Second Force Recon at Camp Lejeune. I wasn't there that long. And then they needed dog handlers for Vietnam. And I said, well, that's interesting. Yeah, sign me up for that. So I went to an Army school in Fort Benning, Georgia. It's Scout Dogs, not to be confused with sentry dogs, So Scout Dogs, they realize the importance of Scout Dogs for patrolling, because they will alert on an enemy scent and alert somebody and keep your unit from walking into an ambush. That was the whole idea. And so they train these dogs to alert on airborne scent. So each dog had its unique way of doing that. It would smell. Some dogs would stick their nose in the air and smell, and you could just look by their body language. And I could turn around and say, there's about 20 of them, and they're about 100 meters down the trail. And they would look at me like, what? That's what he's saying. Okay. You became that attuned to the animal, to the dog that you were assigned. So anyway, so that was the Scout Dog thing. So I work with the regular grunt units, running patrols with them, running point and stuff. And then they said, well, we need dog handlers for force recon. You're a recon guy. Well, why don't you do that? I said, okay. So I went over to First Force, which was in Da Nang. This is 1967 now. Went over to First Force there and ran some patrols with those guys. And yeah, they were pretty crazy. So I think the guys that they were looking for that were crazy, they were definitely in that unit. And so, yeah, one of the things we would do, that mission was basically this. It was a reconnaissance, which is there's two types. There's a keyhole. One thing it's called keyhole, and the other is called stingray. So keyhole means looking, just observing, reporting back. We had an acronym: salute, size, activity, unit, time, and equipment, right? So that's a keyhole thing. You're just snooping and pooping, as we used to call it. And then they had it turned into more of a stingray operation. And here's why. And so stingray means you're going to engage the enemy in a battle, okay? So and the reasoning behind that was that the jungle canopy was so thick in Vietnam that even if you flew over in a helicopter or a plane or whatever, you could hide an entire battalion under there. No one would ever see it. So they would get some intelligence reports that there may be some enemy activity, and they would send us, which was 9 people, eight recon Marines and 1 Navy corpsman. We would get inserted by helicopter, and we would snoop and poop until we could find this enemy unit, no matter what size, and we would play this cat and mouse game. And typically about after 3 or 4 days, we would call artillery in on them. I guess I can say all this, whatever, it's too late now. Anyway, yeah, we would call artillery in on them, and we also had fixed wing, 250-pound bombs, and my favorite, napalm. Okay. And so, which, by the way, is against the Geneva Convention now. They took it off the market, so to speak. But anyway, so we would wind up in a firefight and being surrounded by a superior force about every 2nd or 3rd patrol. And so it was probably the most dangerous job in Vietnam. And, we had out of 100 guys I spent most of my time with 3rd Force Recon up on the DMZ between North and South Vietnam. And out of 100 people, we had, I don't know, maybe 40 killed or something like that. That's too many. The statistics, that's just way too many. So years later, I had a friend of mine who was a U.S. Army captain, Ranger guy and all this, great guy. And so, I told him about all that, and he said, well, that's a poor use of troops. I went, really? How else would you do it? He said, well, we'd send in a battalion. They got a huge army, thousands of people. You can't, where do you start? It's a huge mountainous jungle area. You can't see 5 feet in front of you. Well, that's not going to work. So what we would do is get inserted, get to the high ground, the military crest, which is just below the top of the mountain, so that you don't silhouette, and then just look through field glasses and try to spot enemy artillery. And then we would close with them and call in artillery on them. And then after we called in artillery, they got a little upset, and they know that we were there, and they try to find us. And so it was this cat and mouse game running all around type thing. And another thing that happened is I did engage an NVA, North Vietnamese Army Recon Patrol. So those guys, and the way this happened, a little comical actually. We were at the top of a mountain. I sent one guy down. It was a sort of a little bit of a trail down one end of the trail, and then down the other end of the trail is security kind of flanking us. And I said, look around. So the one kid, 18 years old, he's looking with field glasses, and he sees an NVA recon guy, and they both look at each other like this and go like that, and they both turn around and run like hell. So he comes up to me, he goes, "What's Sergeant Alexander? Sergeant Alexander, I saw a gook. I saw a gook." I said, "Where?" I said, "Why didn't you shoot him?" He goes, "I don't know." So then we saw them running through the bushes and pursued them with M79 fire, which were grenade launchers, basically. And, so that was kind of a comical episode. Another time, and we were assigned a recon zone, which was 6 or 8 grid squares, right? So a grid square is like 1,000 meters by 1,000 meters. And so that was a no-fire zone. So, jets, something flying over, it wouldn't drop ordnance and, kill our own people, friendly fire. And so there was another recon zone not too far from us, and I heard radio chatter. And these guys were in a firefight, but they got caught down in the valley. Not supposed to be down there, guys, because artillery cannot fire for you. If artillery fires, it hits the opposite slope, and it will not go down in the valley, so it's of no value to you. And so I heard that, and I said, let's go over there and see what we can see. So these guys are in this horrific firefight. I could hear it over the radio. So we got up to, within 500 meters of them or whatever. And I said to them on the radio, I said, I'm going to fire a Willie Peter round, an M79 Willie Peter round, white phosphorus, right? I'm going to fire that, and you guys tell me where that lands. So we fired it. And they said, "Oh, no, that's great." They said, "Drop about 200 meters and fire for effect." I said, "Okay." So we started firing, grenade launcher, M79 rounds, dropped them in there. And they said on the radio, "Oh, the gooks are totally confused. They don't know where the hell that's coming from." And it allowed them to break contact and slip away. So I may have saved the lives of all of those guys. But I remember at the time, I thought nothing of it. I was like, it's just another day in the life of being a Marine. That's what I'm here to do. I never thought too much about it. So anyway, so that was quite a few adventures there. Another thing I did, which is a little comical, is our company commander, Captain Floyd. He ultimately made Colonel Floyd, and he's passed away now, unfortunately. He said, okay, the Geo Linh River runs north to south along the east side of Vietnam. It comes from North Vietnam all the way down to South Vietnam. We need you to go there and conduct a hydrographic survey and let us know how deep that is, because we think that the NVA can put rockets on barges and other military supplies and sail them down to South Vietnam, which they really weren't. The real activity was over in Laos and Cambodia on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. That's where they did most of that. But they wanted to see if that was possible. So we helicopter in there with all of our dive gear and this and that. And so we go to check it out. Well, the water is about 2 inches deep. So I came back, I said, sir, the water's we couldn't dive actually, okay? It's 2 inches deep. You're not gonna get a canoe down there, let alone a barge. So that was the end of that. Well, that was kind of ridiculous, but hey, it was part of the adventure. And I was in some firefights with some of the grunts and did see some horrific stuff. I will spare you the details on that. I don't think you need to know that. But people getting wounded and stuff like that. It's not fun, but I can leave you with this. I think people see this stuff on TV. They see the Navy SEALs, or they see I don't know, some people action movies and this and that, and guys are flying through the air, shooting like that. That's actually not how it goes, okay? So where everybody's all bunched up, that's not how it works, So so it is war. That in a conflict, in a military conflict where you're engaged, it's war, and the glory and the bravado go out of that fairly quickly. I want to say, no matter how motivated you are, and of course, the U.S. Marine Corps and many other militaries throughout the world, they train people to be soldiers. You are a lethal combat unit. And the way that my philosophy, and this is in my book, Seeking the Way, and other books, actually, hell, let me do a commercial while we're at it. Other books, I wrote this book, Japan's Warrior Nation, the Samurai in the 20th Century. And this goes through all of the psychological influences that people have on the military. And one of the things in there is, how do you get people to kill other people? And you desensitize the troops, and you dehumanize the enemy. So if the enemy are, less than human, if they are subhuman, it's much easier to kill those people, right? And so that's the idea. So that is one methodology that I'm sure all militaries use since the Roman Empire, okay? So, and maybe before that, the Greeks before that, right? The phalanx and all that. You're not concerned with the welfare of some guy standing in front of you with a shield and a spear who's trying to kill you. All of a sudden that goes out the window. And so that's what they do. But I can tell you that can wear off with sustained combat activity. That wears off. And it's like, man, this is not fun anymore. I mean, I'm young, I'm strong, I'm invincible, but wait a minute. My buddy next to me just got a round right through his forehead. My God, if I was over there, that would have went through my forehead. So it's not, even though you're highly trained in all this, people are thinking, the Navy SEALs, the Army Rangers, or whatever they are, they're invincible. Actually, you're not. If you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, you're dead, okay? So, I feel strongly about that, as you can see. So the training, absolutely, you need to have that, psychological and physical. But if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, doesn't matter. You're dead anyway. And so one other thing that I just talked to somebody about recently is atrocities in warfare. Man, this is really getting deep. Okay, I didn't mean for it to get this deep, but here we go. During the Vietnam War, which lasted, by the way, people say to me, when did the Vietnam War start? I said, about 1400. They're like, what? About around 1400, the Vietnamese were fighting the Chinese, blah, blah, blah. And then the French were in there for 150 years, So anyway, notwithstanding that, what can happen? And we only had one real atrocity in 10 years of war. So it went from 65 to 75, 10 years of war. And so what happens there? And Vietnam was the first engagement, if you want to call it that, that was unconventional. Prior to that, World War II, you know, massive armies were facing each other. Europe, there was one conflict after another where massive armies would be going against one another. But in Vietnam, it was different. It was guerrilla warfare. It was hit and run tactics, which typified guerrilla warfare. And actually, Mao Zedong wrote a book on this, and he talked about using guerrilla warfare to wear down conventional troops while you're building up your conventional army. And once the army, the occupying or the aggressor, or whatever it is, once their forces are worn down, then your conventional army can defeat them. So that's part of the formula. And of course, the people in Vietnam, they've been fighting since 1400. I mean, they have some of the most ingenious booby traps and things of destroying the morale of troops and so forth. So, and so here's a case. I'm going to lay this out as objectively and as academically as I can. So here's what motivates that, because I'm surely somebody has said, well, why would somebody go to another country like that and kill people or women and children and commit an atrocity? What the hell's wrong with that? Well, there's two answers for that. One is you have a troop that's a sociopath, and actually 2% of the people in the U.S. are considered sociopaths, although recently I think it's much higher than that. But anyway, so what happens is sociopath. And we had two of those guys in Force Recon. I'll tell you about them, but I'm not going to give their names. And they're both dead. So anyway, so what happens is let's say you're going down the trail, and whoever's running point, boom, a booby trap goes off, or an IED. And both the guy's legs are blown off and his arms are blown off or something. And he's sitting there bleeding to death. You have to put a tourniquet on him. The corpsman starts an IV. You call in for a medevac chopper, and the guy flies back, and then you get the word an hour later he died. So everybody that knew that kid, that person, that soldier, that Marine is like really upset. They're really pissed off. And there's no one to vent that rage on. So they look across the rice paddy and go, you know what? Those people in that village over there had to know that booby trap was here. Level that village. Napalm, whatever, artillery strikes, fixed wing, 250-pound bombs. My God. I mean, we had a tremendous amount of ordnance there. And so that's how I'm just laying this out. I'm not saying that actually happened. I'm just laying this out as a scenario as how that could happen. Okay. Politically correct. Okay. So that's one way. And another thing about the sociopath is those people are there because they volunteered, they may be in the Marine Corps or whatever, and they're military, and they have no they just have no conscience about anything that they may do. And in fact, they may even enjoy killing people. And so I'm trying to be really careful here. Yeah, so they may go on a patrol and say, yeah, I just want to kill somebody. Let me go. And not follow procedures, not follow orders necessarily, and just kill people. And so a scenario might be that someone would walk into an enemy encampment while they're sitting around a fire and eating chow or whatever, and then just start shooting them one by one. I mean, That could happen, right? The only person capable of doing that is a sociopath. It's someone that has no fear, and it's someone who has no remorse, no fear, no remorse. So that's who would do that. Now, what happens with those people eventually? Either they are reprimanded by command, or they wind up dead because they're risk takers. Too much risk. They're trying to fight the war by themselves or whatever. You'll wind up dead doing that. Not a good thing. So anyway, so now I'm 21 years old. Oh, I forgot. I fought another war before that. Sorry. It wasn't a war. It just it was a little uprising thing, down in, where the heck was that? Dominican Republic. And people don't even know this. In the Dominican Republic in 1965, there was a rebel uprising. And so obviously it wasn't somebody that the US government or the CIA supported. So they sent us. So as a kind of a police action, actually. And so one of the things that happened, so they sent the entire 4th Marine Expeditionary Brigade down there. I remember it well because it was May the 5th, 1965, and I was supposed to report to Combat Intelligence School at 0800 that morning. Instead, the night before, they come into our barracks and say, pack your gear, because our battalion was on standby. Pack all your gear, lock your foot lockers, break down your racks, put your foot lockers on top of your rack. I go, we're going somewhere. And somebody says to me, nah, they do this all the time. We're not going anywhere. I'm like, really? Fall out on the road with all your equipment. Hey, we're going somewhere. Get on the cattle car. We're going to the airport. So then we get on C-130s. Next morning, 8 o'clock, I'm in San Isidro Airport in the Dominican Republic in Santo Domingo. And I'm there and I'm going, yeah, we're going somewhere. All right. And so anyway, so we spent about a month or so down there. And here's another comical thing. Or maybe it's more ironic. We had a guy named Castronovo. And we had a battalion personnel inspection where we used to call it junk on the bunk. We put all your gear had to be in a certain way and folded and this and that, and your uniform had to be perfect and your shoes polished and all this kind of stuff, right? Well, we all did. We were up all night polishing our shoes. They don't even do that anymore. They wear lingerie or something now. I don't know what the hell they do, but anyway. So we're polishing our shoes. Well, he left his shoes under the radiator that night, and all the polish melted off of it, and they were blue. So he's standing at attention like this, and the colonel walks by and looks at his shoes and says something about it. And Castronovo gave him a smart-ass answer, and we all went, holy cow, we couldn't believe he said that. So in the parlance, he became known as a shitbird, okay? And so then a few weeks goes by, now we're in Santo Domingo, and there's some sniper fire, and a civilian gets shot in the leg, and he drags the guy to safety behind a car, okay? And I at the same time, there was a woman and 2 kids, and I ushered them into an alley to keep them from getting shot or whatever. Anyway, so we go back to Camp Lejeune after that little thing was over and done with, and we have a battalion formation, which is fantastic, by the way. They have the band, they play pass and review and all this kind of stuff. It's fantastic. Pomp and circumstance, right? And then there's medals that are going to be awarded. They call Castronovo up and they gave him a Bronze Star for saving that guy. And I went, my God, in a little over a month, you went from shitbird of the battalion to the hero. I'm like, how is this possible? It was great. So anyway, I have a lot of military stories like that. I could go on and on forever, but if you want to talk about martial arts stuff, I'd be more than happy to talk about that. So anyway, I kind of started the martial arts stuff as a kid, like I said. And then once I was in the military at 17, I started doing karate at Camp Lejeune, actually. And then later I went to Okinawa and I trained there. Then I went to Vietnam. And I did karate while I was in Vietnam. I worked out with the Korean Marines a couple of times. They were tough. The Tiger Division and the Blue Dragon Division, they were tough guys. In fact, I have so many stories. What a life. Holy cow. I'll tell you about the Korean Marines. I guess I can say this. Okay. So they loved us because this is amazing. Their Marine Corps was fashioned exactly after, they used the same books and field manuals and everything. I was like, wow. And they even had a Marine Corps hymn. So we were out drinking with these guys one night and they go, okay, stand up. Okay, everybody stands up, sing the hymn. And we had to sing the hymn from the halls of Montezuma. You know, we're singing this and we're drinking like crazy. So the bartender says to the Korean Marine guy, okay, here, you gotta pay the bill. And they go, we're Korean Marines, man. We don't pay any bills. So the bartender gets upset and says, and he calls ARVNs. ARVNs is an acronym which stood for the Army of the Republic of Vietnam. These guys were little more than Boy Scouts, poorly trained, and maybe one step above a Boy Scout type thing. I mean, they were just not, and half of them were VC anyway, Viet Cong, right? So anyway, so the ARVNs come in and they pull carbines on the Koreans. Koreans look at each other and look at them and they take the carbines away from them. You know, we sobered up quickly and went, well, you know, I've got a meeting I really have to go to, you know, something like that. And so anyway, so a lot of that was psychological warfare. The Korean Marines would do Taekwondo demonstrations and break all these bricks and do all this kind of stuff. And I knew that was a psychological warfare methodology because they were trying to intimidate the NVA, the Viet Cong, who would be in the crowd. You wouldn't know who was who. You couldn't tell who it was. And so they knew that they were watching that, and they had their reputation for brutality. Scared the hell out of the enemy. You know, that was the idea, and they certainly lived up to their reputation. They were tough guys. They were highly programmed. No question about that. So anyway, it's enough of that stuff. So let's go back to the martial arts, right? So yeah, I continued to do karate in Vietnam. I had two sensei while I was there. One was a guy named Charles Clark, and he was a Kyokushinkai guy. So we were doing Kyokushin, and we really didn't know what the hell we were doing. You know, I had this guy Sands back kick me in the ribs because I was like this, and he broke my ribs. I'm like, oh, that's great. And then so Clark rotates back to the world, to California, 5 months before I left the country. And then there was another Marine. He was Japanese, a guy named Takeuchi. And I tried to find him on the internet, and I couldn't find him. And so he never said more than 2 words to me. We would show up and we would spar for like 3 or 4 hours at a time. Unbelievable. And he would basically kick the shit out of me. I was a punching bag for him. But I learned, you know, somehow I learned, you know, because I remember one day I said, Sensei, I don't know how to hold my hands. He said, you'll learn. Oh, great. You know, me being an academic these days, right? When he says, you'll learn without any instruction. I mean, please, it was terrible. So, but anyway, so I did learn, I guess. And then, so I got out of the Marine Corps. I went to California, and I actually wound up sharing an apartment with this guy, Clark, the Kyokushin guy. And I was teaching at his dojo where he taught karate and judo. And so I was like his assistant instructor. And so what happened was my learning curve, my skill development, let's call it, was almost exponential because I was practicing. If I wasn't in the bush, I was practicing all the time. And this guy, Takeuchi, even though he wasn't really a great teacher, the practice I did improve. And one of the techniques I got is where you fake the front kick and turn it into a roundhouse kick, right? And I got really skilled at that. And Clark had never seen me do that. And the first night at his dojo in California, he and I sparred, and I did that. And he managed to catch the round kick like that. And he picked me up and slammed me into the floor. And I was dazed. I wasn't quite knocked out, but I went, damn. Ooh, I'm not doing that again. So the lesson there is, even if your teacher's wrong, don't criticize them, and damn sure don't make them look bad in front of anybody else. You will pay dearly for that. I go back to Peter Urban's definition of the dojo. It's a benevolent dictatorship, So that was a lesson. And then I left there, and then I went back to Florida, actually, and I trained with a bunch of people there. I trained with an Awaichi guy who, and here I am, 21, 22 years old. The only thing I knew how to do was fight. So I would go into a dojo and not challenge people, but say, okay, let's spar. Let's see what you got. And so the first guy fell down and faked an injury. When he saw how fast I was, he was, oh my God. So I go to the next dojo, right, which was Shotokan. But they were so snooty, I was like, yeah, the karate's pretty good, but kind of snooty. And then I found a Japanese instructor, a guy by the name of Kenji Nonen. And that style was Renbukai, which was like a full contact version of Shotokan, basically. And we more or less had the same kata, few modifications, but the same kata. And so I did that until he rotated back to Japan, still kept doing that system, but then the organization collapsed. Here we go again. And now I'm looking for another dojo. So then I found Yoshukai, a guy, it was headed by a guy in Florida called, and in the US, a guy by the name of Mike Foster, who was an incredible athlete. His karate was amazing. And he was a big guy. He was like 6'4", 6'5", and fast as lightning, freakish. And then, so he had a couple of things. One, he was fast as lightning. The other thing is he never telegraphed any technique. It was like an explosion, bam, and it just went off. Usually most people will drop a shoulder, or, they'll do something to let you know it's coming. Not him. Bam, that's it. It was like, wow. So anyway, so he was in a political thing with a group called the USKA, United States Karate Association. And they hated him. and because they didn't have anybody that could beat him, and he was really arrogant. Oh man, it was like watching professional wrestling. We love that. So anyway, I wound up staying with that group for about a year and a half or so. And the problem was they got too political. And so they were mad at me because I took my black belt off and put on a white belt, and I could beat all their black belts, usually with reverse punches. And keep in mind, I'm not belittling them. They were tough. And the reason I liked that style, it was a fighting style. I'm like, hey, I found a home here. But the politics were like, ew, they were telling Foster stuff behind my back. And I went, wait a minute. I just got out of the Corps, baby. We protect one another. We stick together. We cover each other's back. This is petty politics. I don't want any part of this. So I left that out, but found another sensei, Ken Ogawa, who was an amazing, if you're familiar with Goju Ryu at all, he was one of Morio Higona sensei's top students in Tokyo, okay, in the 60s. And he was a phenomenal phenomenal guy. Nice guy outside of the dojo, a lot of fun. Inside the dojo, very strict. If you didn't do something right, he'd say, I kick your ball. In other words, translation, in other words, I'm going to kick you in the balls if you don't do it right. And actually, you know what's kind of scary? I said that to somebody the other night. Oh, well, anyway. So anyway, so yeah, so he was amazing. He was amazing. But his thing was he moved from Orlando back to Miami. And he got involved with the wrong crowd. He was a bouncer for Big Daddy's lounges, which wasn't good. Then I think he wound up being a bodyguard for some cocaine cowboys, and he wound up on a plane or a helicopter. So what they said is they put a bomb on it, it exploded, and he wound up dead. He wound up dead at 32 years old. So that's kind of a shame, you know. And actually, I wonder if I can do this. If we look over here, you can see that is the lineage and of that system, Goju-Ryu and Hakutsuru Kempo, which is White Crane Karate, one of the things I teach. Anyway, Ogawa's picture is up. You can't see that very well, but Ogawa's picture is up there. And he was a terrific guy. So he would come over to my house and say, I'm going to make fish head soup for you, like Japanese style. I'm like, oh yeah, that'd be great, Sensei. And he said, you teach me how to make hamburger. I said, sure, I'll teach you how to make hamburgers. I had no idea how to make a hamburger, okay? So I buy a barbecue grill. I got it going out there, and I put some hamburgers on there. Well, they shrunk up to nothing and were black and hard as a rock. And he goes, I don't think that's how to make hamburger. I said, sorry, Sensei. The best I could do, you know. So anyway, so he was a terrific guy. I had a lot of fun with him. I only sparred with him once. He was so fat. And keep in mind, I was around 26 years old at that time and training 6 days a week. All right. Pretty scary. So he was so fast, it was pointless. I couldn't even touch the guy. I was like, this is madness. And so he was the 1970 All East Japan Karate champion. And Higona Sensei's top guys. He used to run 20 miles a day and then come back and jump rope for an hour. Who could do that? He lived in the dojo with Higona Sensei. That era is past. I can't imagine anyone ever doing that again. So anyway, so Ogawa Sensei, and then after him, so he's dead. He moved to Miami. He got in with the wrong people. So then I kind of started back studying Shorin-Ryu again. And that's where I really kind of got involved with now this is like in the early 80s. And then started getting involved with the Okinawan Sensei and so forth. And I've stayed with that pretty much ever since. So the Okinawa Kobudo, the weapons you can see, and some of those different sensei, Fusei Kisei. I spent a couple of years with him. Kuda Sensei. So here's a different lineage. If you look over here, that is the whole Shorin-Ryu lineage there. Okay, if you can see that, a little hard to see. But so I'm actually doing two styles of karate. So I do Hakutsuru Kempo, which for all intents and purposes is Goju-Ryu with a Chinese flair. Okay. And so I did write a book about that. More commercials. That's the book, The Way of White Crane Karate. There it is. 358 pages, a ton of stuff in there. And so anyway, that kind of solve that deal. So we're teaching two styles of karate here. Kobudo, which is pretty much derived from Shorin-Ryu karate, because the Nahate folks, Hakutsuru Kempo, they don't actually do weapons. Goju-Ryu guys don't do weapons. Uechi-Ryu people don't do weapons. They go somewhere else for the weapons training. Why that is, I don't know exactly, but that's just kind of how it is. I could venture a guess, but So I get the guess is that those Nahate styles, Goju, Uechi-Ryu, Ryu-Ryu, and that's about it. And there's other minor ones. Yeah, they were all based on Chinese tradition from Fujian province. And for some reason, just didn't emphasize. It was more of a self-defense style, didn't emphasize weapons. And so you might explore that a bit further. Now, in 2005, I went to China to do some research and training and stuff, and got to visit not one Shaolin temple, but several Shaolin temples. And then I went to Yongcheng Village, which is the birthplace of the White Crane system. And, there's a legend about this woman who founded the system, actually. And she was a gal in a village, and her father was betrayed or beaten up by other villagers or something. So she wanted to find a way to eke out revenge. Typical plot, right? How do I get revenge now? And so she sees some cranes in the backyard and swings a bamboo pole, and they jump to the side, and then she pokes them and they tie Sabaki out of the way. She can't hit him. She goes, if I could learn how to do that, I might be pretty good. And so then she meets a guy named Chang, who's a tiger boxer. And he says, okay, you and I, let's fight. She's okay. So apparently he couldn't land a blow on her, and she couldn't do much with him. So they said, let's collaborate. So anyway, so that's actually the formation of the White Crane style, Hakutsuru. So anyway, so another revelation I had there is, so that style, so we're going back about 350 years now. And I went by her house. There's nothing there. So I took a picture anyway. I went by her house. And so that style sort of migrated all over Fujian province in the south of China. And so along the way, I was studying, I wasn't really studying Wing Chun. I research what other people do, so, and if there's anything good, I'll use it. Whatever. Anyway, so I'm reading the legends, I like to call it the creation myth of Wing Chun, and it's the same identical story of Hakutsuru, of White Crane, from Yangcheng Village. I went, God, this is terrible. It's plagiarism. I mean, they don't have intellectual property laws in China. Okay. In other words, if I can steal it, it's mine. So anyway, so I said, boy, they ripped this off. It's the absolute same creation myth. And then sometime later, it finally occurred to me, it's like, no, it's not a knockoff. They're claiming the same origin, the same creation myth, is that their stuff is derived from White Crane Kung Fu or Hakutsuru. Their stuff is derived from the same thing, and it morphed into more of a street fighting style in Hong Kong. So that's the sort of the origin of Wing Chun, going back, I don't know, 100 years, maybe 150. I'm not sure exactly on the timeline there. So anyway, so that's that. And so that was quite an adventure. And like I said, I spent a lot of time in Okinawa. I spent time in Japan too, because I've done a lot of swordsmanship. Okay. I've done a lot of Iaido, Kenjutsu. Actually, I did modern Kendo for about 40 years. So that's why I have 2 total knee replacements. I swear to God. Anyway, and so I had some interesting experiences there. So one time when I was in Japan, I was 39 at the time. This is 1986. And so I'm training, and I was living with Kamagata Sensei. And he was hooking me up with the Kendo club, okay? They have about 500 members. The whole village participated in this Kendo club. So I'm like, okay, good. And I remember the headmaster was 73 years old. And I said, oh, geez, this poor old guy, I want to take it easy. I mean, I'm 39. I'm like a monster, right? And I trained for 6 months before I went over there. I mean, really hard. And so I said, I don't want to hurt this guy. And then what happened was I couldn't hit him. So, I go to hit him in the head. And he would just go like that, like that. I was like, what the hell? I couldn't even hit the guy. And then in Kendo, what you want to do is go for kote. That's your wrist, right? Like this. Well, he had his wrist wrapped so far around You know, the best way to demonstrate this is with a shinai. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about, okay? So he had his wrist wrapped around like that. That's how you're supposed to do it. Kote is not exposed. You see a lot of people like this. This is wide open. Thank you. Like that, you can't reach it. But believe it or not, this suba will protect. You can go right down and hit on the suba and it'll just fly off. So because of that, I couldn't hit his kote, his wrist, and I couldn't hit his head. I couldn't hit either one. I went, holy cow. So anyway, that was an interesting experience. So I trained there quite a bit. One of the things they did to me there was they said, so their regular kendo class was about, during the week, was at night. It was about an hour and a half long. And so in kendo, there's not so much basics or this or that. It's mostly keiko, which actually means sparring. Keiko literally means practice in Japanese, but figuratively it means sparring, okay? And so there's a lot of that. So your cardiovascular system has to be way up there. So anyway, I did an hour and a half class, and they go, oh, George-san, do you want to keiko? I said, yeah, okay, sure. So I fight one of their guys, and then they go, oh, arigatou gozaimasu. Then the next guy. So I fought 10 guys in a row. This is after the class, right? And so, man, I was in good shape then, right? Whew, 10 matches and after an hour and a half class. Like, yeah, what else you got, you know? So the one guy, and they had like 3 or 4 senseis, and then they had the 73-year-old guy, the head guy and all that. So one of the guys came up to me, the one that said, would you like to keiko with these guys, that guy? He goes, oh, Choji-san, you have a good stamina. I said, man, I'm up to your tricks, baby. You're trying to beat the crap out of me and have me down on my hands and knees, breathing, doing that. Didn't happen, did it? So anyway, that was one dojo. Another dojo I used to train in was Ito-ryu Kenjutsu. And there's a lot of history there. But the headmaster, I'll use that terminology, at the time was Takano Sensei, Hiramasu Takano, famous guy, Meijin, right? Which is above Hanshi, you know. Which how many titles are there? You know, anyway. And so he was 82 at the time. But he wasn't training anymore, but we would train all day long. It was crazy. And so, you know, one day he looks at me, he goes, George-san, he said, you know how long I've been doing kendo? I said, no, sensei. He said, no, it was, he said, no, he was 86 at the time. That's what it was. He goes, I've been doing kendo for 82 years. I said, wow, it's pretty impressive, sensei. He said, yeah, I started when I was 4 and I'm 86 now. I said, that's great. He said, you know, I've been watching you all day. And he said, you know, you have a great talent for kendo. I said, thank you, sensei. And he goes, you know what? Maybe you'll be good in 50 years. Like, what? Oh, that was amazing. He was a great guy. And he died the next year, unfortunately. He was a great guy. But unbeknownst to me, he was the sword fight or a sword fight choreographer. There were 2 on the Akira Kurosawa sword movies. He was the sword fight choreographer on those. I had no idea at the time, and his English was very good. And I said there was another person that I knew named Dan Ivan who kind of set all this stuff up. And I said to him, I said, you know, his English is really good. The rest of them could hardly speak English. But I mean, between my Japanese and virtually no English, I guess, we communicated. But so he said, well, you know, he lived in San Francisco in the 1930s. I went, really? He said, yeah, that's why his English is so good. I went, okay. And I don't know how long he lived there, but I said, okay. So he was a very interesting guy. I enjoyed him quite a bit. So anyway, a lot of stories about mainland Japan and Okinawa, actually. But everybody I trained with in Okinawa is now dead. I think this one guy left, Master Fusei Kisei, and he drank the most and smoked the most of anybody. And why he's still alive, I have no idea. But he's got to be 90 at least. So, but everybody else has unfortunately passed away somehow. But the Okinawans are known for longevity, and they swear by this fruit that or vegetable that they eat. It's called Goya, which is, I know that's something else in Spanish, but in Okinawa, it's the name of a kind of a vegetable. It's a bitter tasting, green looking thing. And they say, if you keep eating that, you'll live forever, or you'll live to be 100 anyway. And so there's a lot of them that live to be 100. But if you think about it, it's an island in the middle of nowhere. There's no manufacturing, so there's no pollution. And you're eating rice, fish, vegetables, and this Goya thing. You're not eating McDonald's hamburgers. And you're doing karate until you're 90 years old or so. So yeah, you're going to last a long time, and probably your genetics have something to do with that. So anyway, so that's kind of in the Chinese records that go back to around 600 AD, they used to call or refer to Okinawa as the island of happy immortals. That's what the Chinese call them. The island of happy immortals. So anyway, I think that might be enough. Let me do a commercial or something, and we could wrap this up unless you have some questions. I showed you this book, Japan's Warrior Nation. That's all about what led the Japanese into World War II, okay, from a political science standpoint. This is another one. This is Sun Tzu, The Art of War. But this is a business book. It's Sun Tzu, The Art of War for the Modern Executive. And it takes the 13 chapters of Sun Tzu and breaks it down as to what you might do as an executive or whatever. What you could do is impress your boss by having this in your briefcase, I guess. I don't know. and here, this is a sword book. And this is what we go by. So what I do, I've done Eshinryu karate and Ito-ryu, whatever, but this is Kamagata-ryu. So this is from the village I was staying in with the Kamagata family. And this has got pretty much everything in it. Really a lot of history. And then I did one on jiu-jitsu as well. That's a whole jiu-jitsu system there. Note the hair color in that picture. And then one of the ones I'm known for is Okinawa Island of Karate. This is a complete history of Okinawan karate. So anyway, so if you want any of those, you can go to yamazato-videos.com. That's a website where you can order that, or just contact me, email me, message me on Facebook or whatever, and then tell me what you want, and we'll make it happen. So anyway, so that's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
Well, I can tell you I have not enjoyed myself this much for a long, long time on Legacy. Thank you, Paul. I'm really grateful. I've learned so much, but I've got a lot of questions for you if you don't mind to.
Yeah, go away. I'm retired. I got nothing but time.
Yes. Let's first inform the public here, mostly South Africans anyway, your South African connection through your granddad.
Oh, yeah, my grandfather. What an amazing guy. I wish I had a picture handy, because you would say, my God, you guys look exactly the same. And the same broken nose, too. He got in a fight with an Apache Indian when he went to do the gold rush in Arizona. He got the Indian drunk, assuming the Indian would tell him where the gold was. And so the fight ensued, and he got a broken nose out of it, same as mine, although a Japanese guy did this to me. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. And I don't have a lot of detail on that, but so I know he went to South Africa for the diamond mining. I'm assuming that he worked for De Beers, but I just don't know. And then, but he had two sisters, I think, and one of them wrote about a 50-page account of her 4 years that she spent in South Africa. And it's kind of amazing. I'll see if I could email that to you. You might enjoy that. But it's hilarious. And it was written around 1900, I guess, or 1904 or something like that. And she was such a prideful thing. You have to read it. You can't believe it. You're like, she was always complaining and criticizing everybody aboard the ship. So she sailed from New York to Southampton in England, and then from Southampton down to, I can't remember if it was Cape Town or where it was, but she sailed down there and then stayed there for 4 years with her. She had a son. Her husband's name was Reginald, I guess. And she would just complain about, and she would talk about the other women on the ship with her and say, oh my God, she's just so horrible and this and that. And then she had 1 or 2 kids with her. And so one of the things the kids did, because they were bored out of their mind, sailing from Southampton, England, all the way to South Africa, is there was some kind of a cart or something, like a dim sum cart or something like that. And the kids would push it up and down the deck. And then so they weren't her kids. There was another family there, and it was their kids. And she was irritated that these kids would push this cart up and down the deck. So she paid one of the crew members one night to throw it overboard. So it's thrown overboard. The next day, the father of the kids are like, where the hell is that? Where'd that cart go? And he recruits Reggie to investigate, her husband, to find out who threw the cart overboard. I thought it was pretty funny, a little ironic again. And so that's one of the things. And then she was a hypochondriac too. You can't make this a movie script. You can't make it up. So she was a hypochondriac. She talks about, she would go to all these different doctors. And one doctor, and I wish I could remember all the name of the towns because you would know these. One doctor said, well, okay, I diagnose you with this or that disease, and I think what you should do is stay in bed for 30 days and drink nothing but milk. And I went, my God, that might kill you. 30 days in bed and you just drink milk? I think you're dead if you do that. So, and then she took a train and went somewhere else, and she was like horrified that they had to go into this hotel. And she said it looked like a place where you would get your throat cut. So, and that's kind of how she ended it. But it was 50 pages. And when you get to the end, you go, oh, I want more. This was fabulous. What a great story that was. And then she, the rest of it should be, okay, then we left South Africa, we sailed back to England, then we sailed back to New York, and this happened and that happened. Yeah, it's really like a movie script. Pretty amazing. So that was my grandfather's sister. And so he had done all these things, the diamond mining, Arizona gold rush, Spanish-American War. He was aboard a ship called the USS Yankee, which were sail and steam at that time. And I found that ship on the internet. And some of the history of what happened there. They sunk 2 Spanish gunboats and destroyed a position ashore, I guess, with cannon fire or something like that. And so this is in Cuba. And anyway, and then I have found a picture some years ago, and it was all these guys in tuxedos in a hotel or something in New York. And I wasn't sure what that was. I realized what it was. It was a reunion. It was a reunion with all the guys that sailed on that ship. I was like, wow, that's fascinating. And so I tried to learn as much about them as I could, but there's not too much. He didn't leave that much of a record. And most of this is like, my parents told me this stuff. I only get it. They said, you're just like him. I'm like, okay, whatever. And so all the stories, and this is just handed down orally, that's like folklore kind of thing, family history or whatever. So anyway, interesting background to have that. And of course, the other thing, he played polo. I'm like, really? That's one thing where we're not alike, because horses and I don't get along. Okay. Now, if I can't drive it, I don't want to be on it. Okay. Anyway, I pull it this way and it goes that way. And it just doesn't work for me. And so we're not alike that way. So he played polo, and then he was a boxer with a really fast jab, apparently. And he worked on Wall Street too. And then he had a yacht. I don't know if you're familiar with Wall Street, but down all the way on the end, on the east side, is South Street Seaport. And he docked his yacht right there. So, yeah, so an amazing guy, actually. Amazing guy. So anyway, so it's good to have that kind of history and background, I think. It's good to have that. But anyway, so that's as much as I know about him. Now, so his ethnicity was Scottish. Alexander's a Scottish name, from Glasgow, Scotland's where they're from. And then the grandmother's name was Bowers, and they were from London. They were like clothiers or something from London. So I've got a quarter Scottish, a quarter English. The other half is Italian. My mom's parents were from Sicily. So holy cow, what a mongrel I turned out to be, So I've got these Scots who were never conquered by the British, right? And I have the Sicilians, which I guess are good with a knife. They express their excuses. Well, I carry a knife because I never know when I have to cut the bread. Yeah, right. So anyway, and so I actually was in the town that they were from. It's a town on the southwest coast of Sicily called Shaka. And it's a fishing village, basically. It's a beautiful place. And so I was able to go there and investigate some of that. And, that's kind of, you always want to know what your origins are, at least I do anyway, where you come from. And so I do have a friend who was a nurse, and she was an orphan or adopted or something. I said, why don't you have your DNA done so you can see what your ethnic background? She said, I don't want to know. I said, why not? You're not curious? You don't want to know? She said, no, because I may turn out to be something bad. I said, oh, come on. How could you not know? I mean, how could you do that? I said, I had mine done. She said, really? I said, sure, 23andMe. You just send them a saliva sample and they test your DNA. And I said, what I found out was my ethnic origins were what I thought, English, Scottish, and Italian. Okay. Melting pot, New York, big melting pot. And, but I also have two sets of genetic markers that are Neanderthal. One goes back 22,000 years and the other one goes back 40,000 years. I said, I'm so strong, I don't need to lift any weights. And so she's looking at me really strangely at this point. I said, you know how much strength it takes to take down a mammoth? And now she's really looking at me kind of strange, right? So anyway, I just thought that was, which is true, but I'm talking, the DNA stuff is actually true. But I was sort of intrigued, I don't want to say fascinated. I was sort of intrigued that she didn't really want to know what her DNA was. Now, I'm pretty sure it's German, or it could be German, something like that. See, those are the people that settled in the area where she's from. So I'm like, that's it. But it was just amazing to me that she didn't want to really know in case there was something bad going on. I don't know what could be. But anyway, that's just the difference between my personality and hers, I guess. And my dad, who started out teaching me the martial arts, he was in the Army Air Corps in World War II, and he was in an outfit called Troop Carrier Command. And what that was the craziest thing ever. It was gliders, which had all these troops, 30 or 40 troops packed into a glider, and another plane would take off towing it, and they would release it, and they were supposed to fly these things in Atlanta. Well, half the guys got killed. You know, it was a crazy Troop Carrier Command, it was called. It was a crazy thing. I don't know that lasted that long, but that's what he did. Yeah, but he was one of the ones that survived. You know, I had another friend, a Shotokan sensei named Ozawa sensei. He was in Las Vegas for a long time. He's passed away now. And we used to make a joke about him, and people said, well, you know, he was a kamikaze pilot in World War II. I'm like, really? He said, yeah, he flew 47 missions. So that was a kind of a joke. And yeah, he was a good guy, a very good guy. One of Funakoshi's original students or whatever, way back in the 30s or 40s or something like that. You know, well, he passed away a long time ago, actually, but he was a good guy. And he was part of a group called the International Martial Arts Federation, Kokusai Budo Renmei. And they had the top martial artists, and they brought them to the United States and Europe. And, you know, it really was a way for Americans to train with some really top people. And everybody that was anybody was in that. I mean, Otsuka from Wadaru, Gogen Yamaguchi, Goju-Ryu, Nakayama from Shotokan, and then Takano Sensei from Ito Ryu Kenjutsu, and then another one is Sugino Sensei. He's the other one, Kotori Shinto-Ryu swordsmanship. He was the other one that was a sword fight choreographer on Akira Kurosawa's movies, you know, Seven Samurai, Yojimbo, and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, it really gave a great opportunity, because prior to that, and I'm talking about in the early 1980s, 83, 84, prior to that caliber of sensei, the only way you get exposed to somebody like that is you had to go to Japan. But they started bringing these guys over, and it was quite a treat. It was really good to work with people of that caliber. So anyway.
You know, it's such a privilege to me to listen to you speaking, and it's a real honor. I really enjoying this. And I presume there will be some Americans anyway looking at this as well as this episode. Let me say to you, welcome here. We have a rich history actually with America, which few Americans actually know. And so I'll just give you this little bit of background. In the first place, we have a song, a very popular song in Afrikaans called Daar Kom die Alabama, which translates to Where Comes the Alabama. And what we mean by that is it's a ship. It's a Confederate Navy ship, the Alabama, which actually came to South Africa twice during the war years. And one of the officers are actually buried in South Africa as well. And the war obviously is still being attended, the war grave is still being attended to. And then in World War I and World War II, we did fight together. World War II, as the South African Armored Division, 6 Armored, fought under General Mark Clark in Italy, and they did very, very well. In Korea, the South Africans were there as well, the fighter pilots anyway. And they did so well that one of the units of the Americans which were having command had an order out of the day that the stem of South Africa, the national anthem, would play a few opening bars before the one of the US as a mark of respect. And then came Dick Lord. Now, Dick Lord ended up as a general in the South African Air Force as a fighter pilot, but while he was at the Royal Navy, he wrote something with some other people which became a Top Gun fighter school project. So there's a lot of history between the two countries which people don't know about. Certainly that is in the past, because the new South African government is a BRICS country. In other words, they take the side automatically of Brazil, Russia, India, and China. It is not a NATO-orientated country anymore. I wrote many books on this subject myself. But we have another thing in common with you, sir. And that is when we came back from our own bush wars and our own wars, nobody really wanted to know about our efforts. Nobody really cared. We were almost like the lost generation, you know. We were not the heroes of the Second World War. In fact, sir, we were treated the same as I would say the Vietnam vets were treated. And still to today, we are still seen as, you know, the people who defended apartheid. Even in fact, we were fighting communism. That's an argument for another day. And we were also accused of war crimes and all sorts of things, which certainly didn't happen. I think of Kasinga, which was the biggest airborne paratrooper attack since World War II, when 4 battalions dropped onto an enemy base, 1978. And they did very well. But today, this day is seen as, of course, this big massacre, which it wasn't. It wasn't. And you mentioned the war crime of Vietnam War 1. I think you were referring perhaps to My Lai. My Lai. Yeah, I see you're nodding there, sir. Yeah, that's of course. We know about My Lai. We did study Vietnam, by the way. Our war started in about 1974. You can argue about that and say about 64 as well, with Rhodesian becoming independent. The police got involved there as infantry. It's a very different police system as with you guys. But around about 74, South Africa, with a national serviceman, same as being recruited as you guys, with a draft, same system, got involved with this. Around about there. And of course, we studied the Vietnam War in great detail. We wanted to know more. And we had many Vietnam vets actually fighting with us. I'm thinking of the 3-2 battalion was famous for having Vietnam vets there with us. So now I have to ask you a hard question, sir. What do you think of people like Jane Fonda and these hippies and liberals who are so much against you guys for just going out and do your service to the best of your ability in a different country and being sent there, being young men, patriotic men, nothing wrong with patriotism. I know it's a dirty word these days, but you know what? There's nothing wrong with patriotism. And I will always defend the right to be patriotic to your own people. Now, how did you deal with that, sir? What do you feel when you come back and people call you a baby killer and such nonsense?
Okay, what a question. Holy cow. Well, first of all, every Vietnam veteran has a strong dislike, I'll put it, for Jane Fonda because she I don't know, was an anti-war person and actually went to Vietnam and hung out with the NVA and stuff. And we thought that she's a traitor, you know, my God, how could you possibly do that? You're not supporting your own country or your own people or whatever. So that's a problem still to this day. The other issue is, oh boy, we went through some machinations there with how the public viewed returning Vietnam veterans. First of all, what happened was the media got involved. There was an anti-war movement, and the media actually, this is my opinion, the media actually stoked the flames of that fire, okay, to get people, the public to recognize more of what was going on in Vietnam and all this sort of thing. The other thing is Vietnam was the first war that was ever televised to that extent, okay? So people were watching Vietnam every night and body counts and all kinds of horrific things. And so, and then I have a theory. The public can tolerate about 10 years of war, but after that, they can't tolerate it anymore. Doesn't work. So anyway, so I think that the anti-war movement and the media promoting that helped poison the population against returning Vietnam veterans and labeling them as baby killers, drug addicts, psychopaths, etc., which in fact they were not. They were so the public was punishing the very people that they sent to war to do this job, which makes no sense. It's kind of psychotic. It's sort of lunacy. So that's what happened there. And then about, I want to say around 10 years later, finally the population, most of them, came to their senses and went, oh my God, that was a mistake to ridicule, to persecute these Vietnam veteran guys, because we're the ones that sent them to war, and they weren't baby killers. They were our neighbors. They were young guys that served their country and did their duty. I mean, that's who they were. So anyway, I think on a personal level, I tried to bury all those feelings and all those experiences and stuff, and what you come to find out is that those experiences will stay with you for the rest of your life. There's no question about that. And so you've got to find a way to deal with that, is what it amounts to. But yeah, the public was wrong, I think, led by the media. And look at today. If you look at American politics today, it's the same thing, except maybe even worse. You know, everything's media driven. Every politician wants to try to differentiate. We have a thing in business management, market differentiation, right? So you want to stand out. Well, there's so many politicians. How do you stand out? Well, you make some outrageous claims or this or that, and then you get media attention. That's all that is. It's media driven. That's the whole thing. So we have that today, but yeah, that happened during the Vietnam War, the same kind of thing. And so, you know, what does the media look for? Well, two stories. One story is Sally made cookies for the bake sale on Sunday. Should we air that? Or should we air, oh my God, there was an atrocity in Vietnam? Which one do you think is going to get the most viewers? So that's what the media, even if they try to be journalists and unbiased and so forth, kind of doesn't work out that way a lot of times. So yeah, that's the problem. It was all media driven. And so, but I think by a decade or so later, by the 1980s, yeah, people came to their senses and said, wait a minute, it almost became fashionable to be a Vietnam veteran. And I remember I went into my corporate career and I wouldn't even tell anybody I was in the Marine Corps, let alone tell them I was in Vietnam. Hell no. They think I was a psycho baby killer, and then I couldn't climb the corporate ladder because of that. So, but then that changed around 85, 86. That became a little bit more fashionable is not the right word, but more accepted. Let's put it that way. So yeah, that's kind of how I dealt with it.
No, that's good. That's exactly. I mean, the problem we have is that we're still not after 10 years. We're still being blamed. But now I did a study actually, sir, and I found out that most Vietnam vets actually did very well in life. Better than the average guys who didn't go.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I noted that you have a PhD. May I ask you, sir, where and in what?
Oh man, part of this problem is being an overachiever, okay? So I actually have two PhDs, one in political science and one in business management. So I have an MBA as well. And my undergraduate degree is in accounting. So, anyway, and I actually taught I taught for SUNY, State University of New York, because I was living in New York for a while. And then I was teaching at a university in Prague for about 3 years over the internet. And so basically I was supervising doctoral dissertations, that type of thing. And so I've written a lot of academic papers too. So people know me as a martial arts guy. They have no idea, and I don't tell them usually, that I've dabbled in other things, So anyway, that it's kind of interesting. And you know, I was telling somebody this the other day. One way that I learn is through research and writing. And, you know, other people have to listen to a podcast or whatever they do to learn. But I like to do research and wind up writing, reducing the research to writing, and that's how I learn. You know, a little fascinated with the Roman Empire and some of these other things, and so yeah. And what I tell people is a couple of things. That's based on a couple of things. One is we think that because of technology and everything else, that human beings and civilizations are much more advanced than they were 25,000 years ago. My thesis is we are not. We are the same as we were 25,000 years ago because we are driven by the same emotions, the same desires, the same fears, and that leads us down the same path again. And we don't learn from mistakes, or we learn slowly, that's for sure. And that's because people don't study history. That's one reason. They don't see well, we don't want to talk about politics, but anyway, people don't study history, so that something's happened in the past. That's I can give you one example, which shouldn't be too bad. Cicero was a Roman orator, etc. And some of the things he did were to thwart an overthrow or a coup of the existing Roman Senate at the time. And he did something to quell all of that. And you can use that as an example and look a few thousand years ahead and go, my God, the same exact thing is happening over and over again. And so I don't want to expand on that too much because I don't want to get you in trouble. But yeah, there's a lot more contemporary history, we'll call it, which have the same example. So we're repeating the same mistakes over and over again. Now, have we advanced? We certainly advanced technologically. It's pretty amazing, actually, what's happened. If you look at between 1900 or Kitty Hawk, the first airplane flight, and now, and the invention of computers, then the invention of the internet, social media, etc. Those things have changed society tremendously. You could argue whether for the good or not, but you know, the world is now connected. The entire world is connected. Prior to the internet, it was not connected. And you look back in history and you go, boy, George Washington wrote a letter to Alexander Hamilton, and I wonder how long it took him to get that letter, and then how long it took him to respond. You know, we're used to lightning speed in the computer, in the internet age. We're used to this lightning speed. I often wonder, God, how did they do it back then? Well, they still did it. It just took longer. You know, so anyway, you know, so that's how society has changed, and that's what I think what has happened. Now, the future, I don't. That's kind of hard to predict. There's a lot of people, you know, one of the subjects now people are really concerned about is artificial intelligence. That the computers will get so smart that they'll go, you know, these human beings are so wasteful. And they're always fighting with each other. Can we get rid of them? So that's Skynet, you know, that's it. That's that. So that, you know, that could be close to happening. So we'll see. You know, I don't know. We'll see, but that's just my thought on it. And then, yeah, the MBA degree. I studied a lot of business, but I had a pretty substantial business background with an accounting degree, then working for an accounting firm. And then I worked in the construction and development business for a long time. And then I wound up being a real estate investment advisor. We had 130 properties in the United States. And then our clients were pension funds. So these pension funds would give us money, and we go out and either build or buy real estate projects. shopping centers, apartment buildings, stuff like that. So yeah, that was kind of interesting too. But I ultimately got out of that. I actually wound up being a real estate developer myself for a while and did pretty good up until about 2008. And then the bottom fell out because of greed, so Wall Street greed or whatever. So then it took about 7 or 8 years for the economy to repair itself. That's pretty bad. And so anyway, so I had fun doing that, though. It was enjoyable. I had a good time. But I've always done martial arts. That has always been like a top priority. Always done that. Always made time for it somehow. And so I'm glad of that. No, that's always been my passion. And you asked me that, or mentioned to me earlier, if you had some advice to give somebody, what would it be? And I think that advice is this: in life, you need to follow your passion. I mean, you could do what I did, and somebody said, "Oh," I said, "what kind of college degree should I get? Because I need a job where I can make some money." They said, "If you get an accounting degree, you'll have a job before you even graduate." Can I make any real money doing that? Yeah, you could do pretty well. I'm like, okay. So I did that. But ultimately, it wasn't me. It wasn't my passion. My passion was martial arts, and then ultimately real estate development. That was my passion. So I'm just, I'm giving advice to some younger person. Follow your dreams, man. Follow your passion. Not blindly, get an education, figure out how to make your dreams come true, but in a more realistic way, using entrepreneurship, using your education. Use these tools to achieve what your passion is, what it is. And so who knows what your passion is? Maybe it's you want to be a farmer. Maybe you want to be a dog groomer. Maybe you want to be a lawyer. Maybe you want to be a doctor and save people. Maybe you want to be in the military. Whatever it is, pursue that. Because if you pursue some other thing that you're just doing that for the sake of money, I don't think you're going to be happy eventually. You're going to be miserable, because it's not about money. It's about the dream. That's what I would say. So anyway, on that happy note, I'm about to run out of juice. I'm looking at my computer here. I'm about to run out of juice, and it's pretty late here. It's 11:20 or 30 or something or other here. So anyway, we could wrap this up. But hey, it's been my pleasure to talk with you guys. I really appreciate it. And if you want to have me back again sometime, I'd be more than happy to do it. We can do more. I'll show you more of the dojo, and I'll show you, I have another course that I teach now. I teach scuba, but I have a tactical scuba course that I teach. And part of that is retrieving nuclear codes from an underwater cave that were stolen by a terrorist group. And you have to retrieve those codes. And there's also an amphibious reconnaissance element to it, where you make a landing in a rubber boat, you go ashore, and you have to find something, and you get picked up by that same boat at another rally point. So it's a 3-day course. There's some PT involved. There's some land navigation involved. All sorts of good things. So, but we're not going to make you run till you puke. It's not gonna be like that. I promise. But it's just going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. So anybody wants to do that, I'd be more than happy to work with them on that.